Good morning and welcome to yet another Scottish Business Network View from the Window webinar, and I'm delighted that this week we are returning to Beijing and to catch up with Tom Simpson, our Scot in Beijing, to hear a bit more about what's happened since almost 10 weeks since we spoke with Tom at the start of lockdown here in the UK. So welcome, Tom. It's morning here and late evening with you in Beijing. How are you?
Very well, thank you, Christine. Yeah, all is well.
Good stuff. Tom, it'd be great if you can just give us an overview of who you are and how this Scot has ended up in Beijing, and also tell us a bit more about the China-Britain Business Council.
Sure. So after I finished high school in Edinburgh, I joined a charity based on the Isle of Coll, who sent me out to the west of China, to the province of Xinjiang, to do a year there as a volunteer, which sort of set me off on my sort of trajectory towards China. I then studied Chinese at Leeds, and then as soon as I graduated, I was back out in China, living and working in Chengdu, and then Chongqing, and down in the south in Guangzhou for about 4.5 years, and then I've now been in Beijing for about the last 5 years or so. So yeah, sort of a sinologist since for the best part of sort of 16, 17 years now. I'm currently the managing director of the China-Britain Business Council. I've been with CBBC for the best part of around 6-7 years now. I originally joined as the chief rep for CBBC in Guangzhou, and before moving up here to Beijing, I was also the director for creative industries and sports, so worked in those sectors for about 3 years, and then took over as MD in September last year. CBBC, we're a membership organisation, a non-government organisation. We're headquartered in London. We have presence right the way across the UK, including a team in Scotland, in Edinburgh and Glasgow. And then also here in China, we have offices in 13 locations. We exist to support British companies trading and investing with China. So many of our companies are the big names, the sort of the FTSE 100s, but also many SME companies as well. We also provide a range of trade support services, including our Launchpad service, which enables UK companies who want to have a presence in China here on the ground. CBBC can employ an individual on their behalf, who can then work for them here in China. We currently have around 75 Launchpad managers here in China working for British companies, universities, and so forth. So yeah, that's a very quick sort of intro to myself and CBBC, the organisation I work for.
But a great intro, so thank you, Tom, and it's great to hear how embedded you are within China, and a great support there for, I know, for Scottish companies looking to enter into that market along with other Scottish government agencies, so thank you for that. It's been several months, Tom, I can't believe it, since we spoke, and you outlined then how China and Beijing was opening up with retailers and restaurant owners tempting customers back to their stores. What's the situation now, Tom? That's now 10 weeks on. What's happening in Beijing?
Well, we've sort of gone a whole nother level forward in terms of relaxing restrictions. I remember when we spoke last, there were still, if you went to a restaurant, there were restrictions on the numbers of people that could sit at a table as a group. I believe at the time it was around 2 to 3 people per group. Now you go to a restaurant, every table can be full. There's no restrictions whatsoever. There's no social distancing. When you arrive, you still have to give your phone number, and your temperature is checked. So you hand over your details. But then once you're inside, you don't need to wear a mask, of course, and you can sit and freely wherever you wish. So that's pretty much since the 1st of May, when the level of caution was lowered here in Beijing and other cities where the level of caution was still quite high. And since then, we've noticed that, wearing a mask in the street even now is not as compulsory. It's not compulsory anymore. It's recommended. But if you're in an area that's not crowded, so say for example you're walking along in a park and there's lots of space, you don't have to wear a mask anymore. If you did that even at the beginning of late April, you would have been reminded by anyone who saw you to put your mask back on, because everyone was very much in that sort of mindset. We really, things have really relaxed in the last few weeks, and Beijing was a bit of a laggard in the sense that Beijing was waiting for the 2 sessions, which was originally scheduled to take place in early March. It was postponed, which is the first time the 2 sessions has been postponed, and it was put off until the 21st of May. So once Lianhui had kicked off and everything was assured that it would be going ahead as planned, there was a sense of relief in Beijing. I think there was a whole nother level of relaxing, let's say, in terms of restrictions and so forth.
And one particular area of interest for us in the UK, England is now into week 3 of easing of lockdown, and there's talk about return to work. Scotland just lifted those lockdown restrictions to the next level on Thursday there. Is the situation now regarding return to work and return to offices, how does that look, Tom, for a particular person going into an office such as yourself?
So when we arrive at our office building here in Beijing, and it's the same in the other office locations that we have around China, you have to show your health kit app. So Beijing has its own city health kit app, which you use WeChat to access. So WeChat, the sort of Chinese messenger and everything else app, you do digital payments on it and so forth. You open up the mini app in WeChat, and it shows that it has a green tick, and it shows that you're able to enter the building, and that you pose no risk to anyone. You've been in the city for at least 2 weeks, and you haven't been to any areas of the country that are at risk. And so you show this app to the security guard. You then walk through, and there's a temperature check machine, which are very similar to the ones that you have in an airport, where there's a fixed camera, there's a screen that shows your body temperature, and you walk through. And different offices and different buildings will have different variations of this. The temperature check might be someone with one of the temperature check sort of handheld temperature guns, or in some places they might not require you to show the health kit app, or they might have a different app that they want you to scan the QR code for. But generally, it's pretty regimented. It's the Beijing Health Kit app, and it's some sort of fixed camera with a screen to check your temperature like you would at an airport. But for us, I mean, on the 2nd of March, we reopened all of our offices in China except for in Wuhan. But we decided that instead of saying to our staff that we want everybody to go back as normal, we introduced a rostering system, so that we had one group back on one day, and then the next day the other group. And we ran that rostering system all the way through March until the 6th of April. So that was best part of sort of 5 weeks. And then we decided that it was safe to say to everyone that it's time to return back to normal. And from the 6th of April, in all locations, again, except for Wuhan, we've had staff working as normal. And then Wuhan for us reopened on the 6th of May, and our staff in Wuhan are still working on a rostering basis there.
Yeah. And within the offices, Tom, is there also a level of social distancing? There's a lot of talk here around perspex, individual units, as well as the testing as they come in. How does it physically look within, for example, your offices now, Tom?
So right now, we've reached the point where, as I mentioned earlier on, May really was a quite key month, where a lot of the sort of measures that people had in place were significantly relaxed, and including inside offices. So now, if you go into our office, there might be 1 or 2 staff who are still wearing a mask in the office, just for their own sort of personal comfort. But there's certainly no expectation that people should be wearing masks within the office. Whereas if you go back to March, when we were on the rostering, pretty much everyone was wearing a mask in the office. Air conditioning was off. We weren't able to turn the air conditioning on in March because the building was concerned about the potential for the virus to be spread throughout the building in the aircon, which meant that March was a very cold month for us. So staff were wearing scarves and jackets. But then as Beijing has sort of heated up over the course of April into May, we then had the opposite problem. It was too hot in the office. But fortunately now, since the early May, they've turned the aircon on, and it feels like a normal day in the office really. So we've gone through those sorts of stages, and now come out the other end where it feels largely like we are pretty much back to normal, apart from, as I mentioned, on the measures on arrival where there are checks in place to make sure you haven't gone to any place at risk.
Yeah. So as you say, there has been that, taking away that fear factor with everyone, but as people have become to understand the controls and what their requirement as an individual needs to be, there has been a loosening of that, and you're seeing an almost return to the new normal, Tom, in offices. That's good to hear. You're always a good indicator of what's going to happen here. As we were discussing before we started the recording, there is significant growth indicators for China for 2020, and China, while it is the 16th export market for Scottish goods, we're exporting there over 625 million to China from Scotland. There were strong growth indicators for China this year. Given what's happened, what are the growth indicators showing for the rest of the year, Tom?
Well, Q1 growth for this year, well, Q1 there was a contraction of the Chinese economy, around about 6.8%. The first contraction on record since 1992. The expectation for Q2 is there will be a rebound. I don't expect that there'll be a full recovery in this rebound, and we'll go back up to sort of double digits or anything like this, because the activity indexes that we're tracking just suggest that the Chinese economy is still operating at below normal activity levels, at around sort of 85 to 90% of normal activity. But what was interesting during the two sessions recently, the annual GDP target has now been removed. So normally during the two sessions, which usually take place in March, the GDP target for the year coming up ahead would be set, and that would be the target that the government would aim for. Liang Hui, which was taking place last week, it was announced that GDP target would be removed. And if the GDP target had been kept and the pandemic hadn't occurred, it is believed that the target would have remained at around about 6%. And that's a number that people would have been wouldn't have been unusual or unexpected. But the target's been removed entirely, and the focus now is very much on employment. So trying to avoid a situation where perhaps there's mass unemployment, or there's a situation that could see the economy be dragged into sort of a prolonged recession. So the focus is very much now on different priorities. And I think there was a recognition by the government that the GDP target perhaps created a focus by the government that perhaps actually could have potentially got in the way of making the right decisions to make sure China gets through the next 12 months in the best way possible.
Thank you, Tom. Just want to clarify there, did you say that the Chinese economy is still operating at 85 to 90% below normal levels?
No, so it's recovered. These are obviously, these figures are very hard to clarify, exactly what's going on. But one of the indicators that we track is there's a company called Trivium who track the economic activity here in China, with a weighting more towards the industrial companies, industrial activity. And they're showing that the activity is around about 87.6% of normal activity. So measuring that activity against the year before. So still around about sort of 12-13% off where we would expect China to be at based on previous year's figures.
Lovely. So as always, my last question is for those coming into China to do business with you, and we export our educational services, chemical sciences, food and drink, etc. What advice would you be giving to Scottish businesses regarding their relationships with the Chinese market for the foreseeable future, Tom?
Well, we certainly believe that China has been the growth driver for the world over the last decade or so, and will continue to play that sort of a role, and especially in its position as the country that is sort of emerging first from the pandemic. So I would say to Scottish companies who are watching that China should be seen very much as part of a company's or university's recovery strategy. And even though it's currently not possible to do business travel to China, there are the resources and support available here from the likes of CBBC, but also from Department of International Trade, from STI. And we're all here, and we all very much want to help. So do get in touch with us if there's anything we can do.
Well, a great message to end it on, Tom, and I know you provided fantastic support to our members in the wider Scottish business community, and long may that occur. Tom, a joy as always to speak with you, and also great for us to get an indicator around the what next. So as always, stay safe, and I look forward to catching up with you again in the near future. Take care.
Likewise, Christine. Cheers.